Telltale's The Walking Dead Season 2 is really bad. When I first played the game, I thought it was pretty good, but the more I thought about it on multiple playthroughs, the more issues I found. I would even go as say that Season 3 is better than 2. And while Season 3 is not really good, at least it's not as bad as Season 2. I think Season 2 is the worst season. That by the end of the game, all I thought to myself was, what was the point of any of it? But I guess I have to go and explain all my issues with this season. But before we go into the story, I want to mention that this game is a big downgrade to Season 1. While I get that in the first season, no matter what you pick, you always end up in the exact same place. It did, however, do a much better job at giving you the illusion of choice and giving you better puzzles to solve. This game, however, has so few lines that no matter what you pick, a lot of them don't fit with some of the dialogue options you chose, or make you end up in the exact same place anyways with no option for different outcomes, making most of your options unnecessary. The puzzles in this game are just non-existent. One from Season 1 I can think of is the whole puzzle around trying to get into the motel and how you had to do different actions to progress further. In Season 2 there aren't any of those. I mean, the one I can think of from the top of my head is the one with the car horn, but that one is also solved pretty easily. Most of the game is you having to do quicktime events, but some of the quicktime events can just be failed and you don't die from them. Some just being worthless that don't really affect anything you do. But alright, let's get into episode 1. The episode starts off with Clementine traveling together with Krista and Omid. It's actually pretty nice seeing that Clementine has found Krista and Omid at the end of Season 1. Krista is also pregnant. They make a stop at those bathrooms. Omid and Krista go to the male's bathroom while they let Clementine go alone in the woman's bathroom. This part confused me. Like, why did both Krista and Omid go to the male's bathroom and let Clementine go all alone in the other bathroom? Especially since Clementine is a little girl and they don't know what to expect in those bathrooms. What if there's a walker in there and tries to attack Clementine? I mean, sure, Clementine has a gun, but seeing as though she's a little girl, she's not that highly experienced with this stuff, so it would make sense if they all made sure both bathrooms are safe. I've seen people online say that the reason they both went to the male's bathroom is cause they were gonna get it on, but the game hasn't really implied this to be the case. Even if they were trying to get it on, this is still highly irresponsible, especially during the apocalypse, to just let Clementine go all alone in a public bathroom they're unfamiliar with, especially if anyone can just come in and threaten her. Clementine goes to clean her face in the woman's bathroom, but oh, she let the water bottle fall. A girl then happens to walk in and grabs Clementine's gun that she just so happened to leave there, and threatens Clementine with it. If only they didn't leave her all alone in the woman's bathroom. Omid comes in an attempt to take the gun away from her, but then the door happens to close behind him and the girl panicked and accidentally shoots him. You heard that right. They decided to kill off Omid in the first 10 minutes from a series of unfortunate events. Krista then walks in and shoots the girl. Seeing as she had the gun, she blames Clementine for being reckless and leaving her gun on the sink. Wow, Krista, if only you made sure that Clementine stays safe inside the women's bathroom. How unfortunate that they just so happened to get to those bathrooms. How unfortunate that they just so happened to leave Clementine all alone. How unfortunate that Clementine just so happened to drop her water bottle. How unfortunate that that girl just happened to walk in. How unfortunate that the door just happened to close and the girl shoots Omid. After that, we cut to 16 months later. Krista is very distant and cold towards Clementine because she still blames her over Omid's death. Krista walks away trying to get more wood to keep the fire lit, and then she gets ambushed by a bunch of Randys. We get the option to distract them so that Krista can get away, and after a chase scene and falling in the river, we end up all alone. And we never get to see her ever again. We don't even get to know what happened to her throughout the game. Clementine will vaguely mention Krista a few times, but the game never bothered to explain what happened to her. I mean, from the sound of it, it sounded like she got shot.
Krista, run!
Which I would assume means that she has died. This is like the most disappointing thing the game has done. They get rid of Krista and Omid just like that in the first 20 minutes of the game, so that Clementine can end up all alone, which is such a big waste of two good characters. Especially since later on in the game, they pretty much get replaced by two other characters who pretty much fulfill similar roles. Why do we have to get rid of Krista and Omid just so they get replaced by Rebecca and Alvin? Why couldn't it just have been Krista and Omid? And wouldn't it be a lot more impactful if Krista got her baby instead of Rebecca, since Krista was a character we knew since season 1, instead of Rebecca, which is a character we barely know. The fact that they made Krista pregnant just so they get rid of her baby, we don't even get to learn what happened to her baby. I mean, I would assume that it died. The game never really bothered explaining. You cannot be serious. Clementine ends up on a camping spot with a dog. Even if you try to befriend the dog after you find the food, the dog will end up trying to steal the food and trying to kill you. This whole thing is just there so that Clementine can have a big dog bite on her arm and starts bleeding out. She gets saved by 2 people, Luke and Pete. They notice the bite on your arm and assume that it might be a walker bite. They don't really believe you if you tell them it was a dog bite, and they bring you to their house after you collapsed. The group seems to be very distrusting of you, assuming you might be working for someone named Carver. And then we get introduced to Carlos. He's a doctor. We show him our arm and he can't tell if it's a human or a dog bite. Now, sure, I have seen a lot of people clown on Carlos for not being able to distinguish a dog bite from a human bite, and people have been using examples to try and justify him not being able to recognize it. But that's not really my main problem. My main problem is they all decide to lock you up in a shed and wait till the morning so they can see if she would turn into a walker or not. This is really stupid. And no matter what dialogue options you choose, you will not be able to get into that house. They are not even willing to clean it up and see if it really is a walker bite or not. And even if they aren't sure, locking her up in a shed without treating her wound is a really dumb idea. Carlos mentions that if it was a walker bite, Clementine would have gotten a fever, but the fact is that they lock her up in a shed at night with an open wound, and they do not account that she would probably develop a fever from it anyways. Plus, her wound could get infected anyways without cleaning it up first. Plus, she was drenched in wet clothes, and leaving her out like this at night in the cold can make her develop hypothermia. The point here is Clementine would probably die anyways, and seeing as Carlos is supposed to be a doctor, he should account for those things happening to her. Why didn't they just clean her up and lock her up in a bedroom? Someone outside can keep watch if there's a potential that she might do something. That would make a lot more sense than locking her up in a shed. This whole thing is just an excuse so that Clementine can sneak into the house and we get the scene of her trying to stitch herself up. But then a walker comes in and we defeat it, and the others come in anyways and they patch you up and bring you to their home. Like, are you for real? After all this? You cannot be serious. We even get introduced to Sarah during this, and we get to learn during the game that Sarah has a lack of awareness and is very ignorant. But it's not entirely her fault, cause Carlos keeps her sheltered from knowing how awful the outside world is. Carlos mentions that Clementine is not to be trusted. I would have assumed that the rest of this episode and maybe the second episode was gonna be about me trying to gain the trust from the others. But they bring this up, let Clementine roam free basically, and then it's ignored entirely. Even Rebecca at first just despises you cause she doesn't trust you at all, and pretty much was ready to let her die. Nick comes in and apologizes for being a jerk. That's nice of him. And now we're off the next day to go fishing with Pete and Nick. Nick is a jerk and Pete is being hard on him. We go to a river and see a bunch of dead bodies. We find our backpack and one of the guys who attacked Krista. Clementine tries to ask him where she is and he asks for some water. If you give him the water, he doesn't answer our question. And if you don't give him the water, he doesn't answer our question. It's not like the water bottle is used for anything afterwards, and choosing either one does absolutely nothing. So what's the point of giving me the option? Pete gets bit and then you get the option to either go with Nick or Pete. It doesn't matter which one you choose cause Pete dies anyways. It's not like in the first season where you get the option to choose Doc or Carly and one of them stays throughout episode 2 and halfway through episode 3. You know, they actually gave me a choice and it affected the other episodes. I know they both end up the same way, but the illusion was still there. No matter what you choose, Nick is the one who's gonna come back with you for the other episodes. And I just got to know Pete. I chose Nick and Pete dies from the walkers. And that's the end of the episode. Well, that was pretty bad. All of these unfortunate turn of events cause the characters are being stupid and irresponsible. But now we are with a new group of people. I wonder how this game develops them in any meaningful way. Alright, episode 2. We start off with Clementine and Nick hiding out in a shed. We have learned so far that Nick is hard to work with as he held a rifle to my face and goes off on people. Here he just sits around not knowing and caring what to do. And this is where the game tries to humanize Nick a little. He explains that the reason he's a jerk is because his mom got bitten and he had to put her out. And we have the choice to be sympathetic towards him. Well, choice as in all the options lead to the same thing. It doesn't matter whether you ask Nick to stay or leave with you, cause after you convince him to help you, he distracts the walkers and stays behind anyways. If you choose to go to Nick, he pushes you away to go back to the cabin, so what's the point? After we go back to the cabin, we tell Carlos and Rebecca what has happened. Luke and Alvin went out looking for them, but they didn't come back, so Carlos and Rebecca go out looking for them.
Clementine, can you please watch Sarah? She's upstairs. Just distract her, and don't tell her anything.
I'll take care of her. You can trust me.
Thank you. You'll be safe inside. Just don't open the doors for anything. We'll be back soon. And thank you.
I guess the whole thing about not trusting Clementine is just dropped entirely. So now we are all alone with Sarah and we get the option to befriend her. We even get the option to teach her how to use a gun. Now what really bothers me about that is that after you teach her how to use one and the game informs you that Sarah will remember it, she never gets the opportunity to use one at all. I don't understand what the point is of me trying to befriend Sarah and teaching her to defend herself when they never give her the opportunity to prove herself or develop her in any meaningful way. I don't hate Sarah, I thought she could have had the potential to be an interesting character, but it seems like throughout it the game just actively hates her, even giving you options to be rude with her for no reason. Despite the game making it seem like she's gonna be an important character, she's given nothing to do. After this, a stranger is approaching to our cabin and opens the door. Why did Carlos leave the door unlocked? And of course, if you try to lock the door, the game doesn't let you. After this, the group comes back and we tell them that there was a strange man who showed up. They come to the conclusion that it's most likely Carver and now we're off. Rebecca is now suddenly cool with you, I guess. It's not like we ever got to interact with her, but okay, I guess she apologized for how she acted. We arrive at the shed and find Nick. Luke and Nick hug it out and grieve over Pete's death. Nick thanks me for not giving up on him and Luke talks about how he's worried about him. Alvin is just kinda there, I guess. We never interacted with him yet. So after 5 days later, we end up near a bridge. Clementine and Luke go check it out. Nick wants to come with you, but Luke tells him to stay back. But Nick is insisting that he comes with. Seeing as Luke and Nick are supposed to be close friends and Luke is worried about him, he just ignores him and leaves. He doesn't go, "Nick, I know it's tough, but I need you to stay behind to protect the others. Can you do that for me?" Or anything. Like Luke said, he's worried about him and he knows Nick can just go off at any time and do something stupid. But here it seems like he doesn't even bother. Sure, he says he doesn't trust him, but I mean, you have to ensure to Nick that you still care about him. So Luke and Clem are on the bridge and they meet a stranger with a rifle.
Play it cool. You do the talking.
What? Why me?
I don't want to get in a fight. You really think he'd shoot a little girl?
Luke, are you this irresponsible to not do the talking?
Huh. You don't look like assholes. Are you assholes?
I'm not an asshole.
Are you calling me an asshole?
So we meet this nice guy who offers us food, but then Nick shows up and aims his rifle at him. No matter what you choose, you cannot stop him from shooting the gun.
Mind checking it out? Maybe we could spend the night here.
Why don't you go look?
I'm going to sit with Beck here for a minute.
Alvin, I told you I'm fine.
I'll be right behind you.
Pretty funny how we are always the one who has to do things around here. When we go talk to Nick, he regrets having shot that guy. We even get the option to give him his watch, which does absolutely nothing. We then get to find a knife and some canned food. We make it to this house and this is where we run into Kenny. I think this is a pretty well done reunion and it is nice to see him again. It did put a smile on my face. We later even get to have a talk with Kenny about what happened back in season 1 and that we got separated from Krista. Kenny has even found a new partner. Now the sad part is Sarita doesn't really do much in this game. We have a conversation with her in the house, but other than that, the game never bothered to develop her character in any meaningful way. This is an issue throughout the whole game, where characters get introduced. They make them seem more important than they really are, and they don't develop these characters. And when they're not useful to the plot anymore, they just abruptly kill them off. The first season did this way better, where the important characters that do die are actually given development before being killed off in any meaningful way. Ben, for example, throughout the game, he acts like a scared and worthless guy that messes things up. He didn't mean to put the group in harm's way, but in the end, if you choose to save him, he stands up and tells off Kenny. Kenny even sympathizes with him and he kills Ben out of mercy later on. Nothing like this really happens in this season. Everyone just dies when they're not really needed anymore, without any proper resolution. We talk to Rebecca and she tells us that the baby might not be his, so the implication is she had a thing with Carver. Then the game gives us the option to sit with Luke or Kenny. I mean, the cabin group hasn't really been nice to Clem and all of a sudden they're acting nice to you. It's like this game is setting up some kind of rivalry between Kenny or something, but it's so off when we can't tell the other, sorry, I'm sitting with the other person, and Clem just coldly ignores them. I don't think it even matters which one you choose. They like start an argument with Kenny and Kenny accidentally calls you Doc. After this we go out and the game develops Walter a little. I mean, he has a conversation with you about connecting with people and adapting to the world. He keeps mentioning someone called Matthew, and at that point it's obvious that the guy Nick shot was Walter's friend. After this we meet a woman called Bonnie who has been looking inside the window and she claims that she needs food and that she has a family. After this we meet up with Luke, he pieces things together and I told Nick about it. After this Walter found the knife in Clem's backpack and has murderous intent. If we succeed in defending Nick, Walter will not let him die later on. Now, this is where the issue lies. After saving Nick, the game in later episodes does not give him anything to do at all. People barely talk to him, and in some scenes he's not even all that present. It's cause they knew there was a chance that Nick could die before that, but after that they don't give Nick anything meaningful to do anymore. Carver afterwards comes in and captures everyone, and he ends up killing Walt. Well, that was a waste of a character. So now we're on episode 3. Carver brings the whole group back to his base, everyone is imprisoned and we have to work for him from here on out. The base is a very boring place. Not only is it not well explored, we mostly go to like the same 3 locations. It's also not helping cause every episode is also 1 hour and 30 minutes, so it has barely any time to properly establish and develop everything. We get like 1 conversation with Carver in his office. That's it. Alvin gets all beaten up and then he dies. The thing with Alvin is we had like no developed relationship with him. All he really is just a nice guy, and that's all we really know about Alvin. We meet a guy called Reggie who has helped the group escape in the past, but ended up staying behind and got a walker bite, so they cut his arm off. None of the characters get any meaningful development here at all. Carlos does nothing other than hit Sarah. Rebecca does nothing other than cry, I guess. Sarita does nothing other than, well, nothing. Nick does absolutely nothing. Why should I be invested in any of these characters if they give them nothing to do? We get introduced to Mike and he's just part of the group, I guess. He also doesn't develop at all and is just kinda there. The next day we get to work with Bonnie, and this is where she's like all sorry for everything she did. She wants to prove to Clem that she cares about her and everything by giving her a jacket. I mean, this isn't like a bigot sandwich situation where the guy can be easily forgiven. Bonnie led Carver to them and he ended up killing a friend of theirs. So what, you expected Carver of all people to not hurt anyone? I thought Bonnie was gonna redeem herself in any meaningful way, but no. She joins the group and everyone accepts her. I mean, she did help us escape, sure, but I kinda wished she did more. Maybe apologize to Kenny about Walter or something? That would have been something. I mean, all Bonnie really does afterwards is just to tell me to do stuff, cause I guess she can't be bothered to do it alone. Like, no wonder Kenny doesn't trust you. You did nothing to earn that trust. After that, we meet up with Sarah at the greenhouse. Reggie comes in after and tells us what we have to do. Sarah doesn't understand, but we either get the option to help her or not. It doesn't matter which one you choose. Carver will come in and kill Reggie either way. I assumed that picking to help Sarah would at least strengthen our bond, but that doesn't really happen? Either way, you get the exact same results. After this, we meet up with Luke and he tells us that he hasn't been sleeping for a while and that he has a plan to get us all out. So he asks Clementine to get a walkie-talkie. After this, we have this talk with Carver about survival and killing people, and that's pretty much all we get from Carver. I think if Carver is supposed to be such a big threat, he should have been alive for like 1 or 2 more episodes, but he dies in this same episode and we all escape. So now we're back with the group. Kenny and the others are discussing a plan to get get out of here, and we mentioned that we ran into Luke. Not knowing how they would get past the horde of walkers, Jane randomly comes in and tells us we robbed walker gods to get us through. Also, why isn't Nick saying anything? So we try and get the radio to Luke, but uh-oh, he got caught. No matter what you choose, Kenny will take the blame and his eye will get beaten by Carver. So now we're gonna go with the plan of attracting walkers by turning on the PA. We see Alvin in Carver's office and he's running out of time. I didn't really feel anything for Alvin. Again, I barely got to know him and the game did not bother to develop his character. So why exactly should I even care? So after this, we overtook Carver and Kenny beats him to death with a crowbar. Now we're all outside and escape the horde. Carlos gets shot and then he dies. Again, I feel absolutely nothing because Carlos wasn't developed in any meaningful way. Sarah freaks out and runs off. Sarita gets her hand bit and we get the choice to either cut her arm off or kill the walker. It really doesn't matter which one you choose. Either way, Sarita is dead the next episode. No development, no conclusion to her character, no nothing. Why does the game keep on doing that? So now we're on episode 4, and this is where the story nosedives off a cliff. We escape the herd and get to the meeting spot, but Luke and Sarah aren't there. On the way there, we get a glimpse of how distant Jane is towards other people. Throughout the game, she talks about how she feels that it's better off to be on her own and not let other people drag you down. She even mentioned having a sister which she didn't bother with fighting and left her to die. After that, the group is like asking Clementine to go talk to Kenny, and Kenny flips out on Clementine. Kenny has been through a lot after losing everything and now he just wants some alone time with Sarita. Jane and Clementine are going to go look for Luke and Sarah. The game develops Jane's character during this. I know, what a surprise. She's like the older sister for Clementine, teaching her how to defend herself with those neat tricks and giving her necessary tools. But Jesus, I feel like Jane was introduced way too late into the game. Not only is most of the group gone, making the entire thing with them obsolete, especially since they didn't bother developing them in any way. I mean, we got Mike and Bonnie, but they do absolutely nothing. And there isn't really much I could say about Rebecca other than she's having a baby and gives people some attitude. But the thing with Jane is like there's no real point to her. I mean, the game set up some kind of rivalry with Luke, I believe? Or think that was their intention? What if Luke did have some kind of rivalry with Kenny? That would have been interesting, especially since Luke was a character we knew since episode 1 and the whole theme with trust could have been explored properly. Jane doesn't really interact with the group all that much, especially with Kenny, which I will get into later. I mean, I get that's kinda her thing not to get too attached to people, but I feel like Jane was probably one character too much. Well, heck, Mike and Bonnie were probably too much. You could have gotten rid of one of them. I mean, Mike was originally supposed to be one of the bandits who attacked Krista, and the whole theme of trust could have been developed when we got to see him again. And Clem and Kenny can be very distrusting of him until he proves himself and is being forgiven. That could have been something. But no, Mike is just kinda there, I guess. I wouldn't have even cared if they killed him off at any point that isn't near the end of episode 5. Bonnie also just does nothing to gain Clementine's or the group's respect. I mean, sure, she helps us out with the escape, but after this she doesn't do anything and just asks Clementine to do things. The game doesn't really bother to make them like bond with Kenny or something, especially of how distrusting he is of everyone besides Clementine. And then we get to see Nick, who got turned into a walker off screen. He was a major character who got a lot of development in episode 1 and 2. Episode 3, he does nothing at all and he just abruptly dies in this episode. It's as if the game just wanted to get rid of him without giving him any conclusion to his character. This is really disappointing. Even later when we meet up with Luke and tell him that Nick is dead, all he says is the F word and then that's it. We get inside the house where Luke and Sarah are in, and Sarah is so shocked over her father's death that she won't move. And this is where the game gives us the option to either leave her to die or convince her to come with us. I obviously convinced her to come with us, but after you have done that, the game does absolutely nothing with Sarah. We have the option to talk to her a few times, but it's barely anything and doesn't do anything at all for the rest of the episode. All this time of trying to befriend Sarah and teaching her how to defend herself is just wasted. What makes this even worse is that she dies later on within the same episode. You barely get to have a word with her or get her to do anything special and they just kill her off. I told Jane to save her, but then out of nowhere she gets hit in the head by this plank and Sarah dies. You cannot be serious. Luke also doesn't really do anything meaningful to his character. He's also just kinda there. So now we get to this building and meet up with Jane. A stranger then passes by and Jane takes the gun from him. The bag contains medicine and Jane suggests that we should rob from him, but I chose not to rob from him, which doesn't really affect anything. And this is where we go to the museum where Bonnie and Mike are. Oh good, my favorites. We get inside this thing and collect some bottled and clean water, which doesn't really matter at all because afterwards I told Mike to grab Sarah and not the water, and the others didn't like scold us for it or anything. So what was the point of collecting the water? After this, Kenny has successfully delivered the baby and now he makes it his priority to keep it safe. Jane decides to leave the group, which I guess is in character for her to do. And after we leave that building, we get ambushed by the guy we met.
We don't want any trouble.
I told them you are the ones who robbed me. They think it's funny that you're just a little girl.
Robbed?
And they want you and your friends to put down the guns so we can take your things.
No, I didn't. I told Jane not to steal from you at all. Why is this conflict happening? What the heck? You cannot be serious. Rebecca then dies from losing too much blood and I decided to shoot her. And then the episode ends. Wow, what a crappy episode that was. At this point, the whole thing with the group is just abandoned and the game mostly focuses on Kenny's outbursts now, I guess. I mean, sure, we delivered the baby, but it's like the game had no idea where to bring the story, so they decided to put in some random ambush over something I didn't even decide on doing to begin with. And now we have this Randy with us Kenny pushes around. It's just a series of events now that feels so disconnected from what happened in the past episodes, cause now we're just focusing on the newly introduced characters. The cabin group is just no longer the focus. The only one who's alive at this point is Luke, but like, he's given nothing to do. I mean, he has like a relationship with Jane going on off screen, but like, who cares? It's not like we ever got to see that relationship develop, just like every other thing in this game that wasn't developed. Alright, final episode. Oh yeah, Jane is now back, I guess. The only reason she left was so this conflict can happen, and then she comes back to save them. We get to this place and chill in there for the time being. There is a bonding moment that these characters have. I mean, it's not much and it doesn't really mean anything, but I guess they tried. Kenny is like the only interesting character now, and yeah, the game does keep hammering you over the head over his outbursts, and also hammers down on you that you have a soft spot for Kenny. But I mean, he's the only guy who not only has gone through so much, but kept getting back up for the sake of helping us. Kenny even apologizes to us over him hurting Clem's feelings. So now the group end up in this place where they have to cross an iced river. But uh-oh, the ice is cracking beneath Luke and he fell in. Bonnie suggests that Clementine goes cause she's lighter, but Luke tells us that neither of them should go and you should just give him a minute. I did just as he told, but then Bonnie decided to go walk up to him. They both fall in the ice and I tried to break open the ice and fell in. Luke is dead. Wow, again with killing off a significant character just like that. I guess the story was just done with him and had no idea how to get rid of him in any way that concludes his character. Now all the characters from your previous group is dead. You cannot be serious. So now we make it to the building and Kenny beats up Arvo some more. Kenny is outside trying to fix up a truck and the others are scared of him. We have the option to go talk to Bonnie, but then all of a sudden she starts being a huge jerk and blames us for not trying to save Luke.
I'm sorry about Luke.
Sorry. It must be nice being a pretty little girl. No one ever expects you to do a damn thing. You and I both know you had a chance to save Luke. You and I both know what happened back there. I got nothing more to say to you.
Like, hello? Luke specifically told us not to go near him because it would break the ice. Hello? After Kenny managed to fix up the truck, he suggests that they all go to Wellington, but the others don't agree with his plan. Now, the whole thing with going to Wellington is really stupid, and now any reasonable person would try and talk it out with Kenny and come up with a proper plan. But then, in the middle of the night, Mike and Bonnie attempt to leave Clementine and the others and grab all the food they have, pretty much betraying Clementine. Arvo then shoots Clementine and she's unconscious. Well, I guess that's it for Mike and Bonnie. And Arvo, I guess. After having the scene with Lee, which I don't really have much to say about, we wake up in the car and Kenny goes north to find Wellington. Now, why this plan is stupid is because Jane mentions that Howie's has some formulas and it would probably keep the baby warm. It makes more sense to go back to Howie's and make sure that the baby stays alive. It's Kenny's top priority, remember? I mean, like she said, it takes about a day to go to Howie's, and I mean they can go to find Wellington afterwards. But I guess we need to have Jane and Kenny argue over it. Jane suggests protest, leaving Kenny, but then a few walkers arrive and they crash the car. Afterwards, we arrive in this building where Kenny happened to be at. Jane then walks in without AJ, which makes them believe she ended up killing him. I have no idea what Jane's plan here is. It's really stupid. Why does she think to make Kenny so mad that he starts attacking her is a good idea? Jane isn't really one to start fights with others, and you have to get yourself involved during it multiple times. She did all of that just to prove a point of how unstable Kenny is? Then why upset him even more? What makes this thing so bizarre is also because Jane and Kenny barely interacted throughout the game. It's like the game just needed to end it with some kind of big fight, so they decided to use Jane for it. Why couldn't it have been a character from the cabin group? Couldn't it have been Luke or something? I mean, they set up some kind of rivalry with him, I think. So I would think Luke, who is the one who interacted more and argued with Kenny, would make more sense. She left a baby in a car in the freezing weather. Is Jane stupid? Leaving a baby in the frozen car crying? What if a walker shows up and tries to get in? This is another thing I just don't understand. How is AJ alive in such a cold weather with nothing but a blanket? And of course I picked Kenny over Jane because I think Jane is just really stupid. I mean, if Kenny dies, he gets like a big speech while Jane just gets nothing. It's like they knew no one would care about her. We then cut to 9 days later and AJ is somehow still alive. So we finally found Wellington, but the bad news is that they're not letting any new members in. Kenny begs them to take the kids and asks Clementine to stay. I picked staying in Wellington because it feels like a natural conclusion, not only to Kenny's tragic story, but also because it's his wish that we're both safe. Kenny takes the bag and leaves, and so the game has ended. Oh man, what a game that was. It's clear that the biggest issue this game faces is that none of the characters are developed in any meaningful way. The illusion of choice is almost non-existent and done way worse. Walking Dead has a habit of just killing characters off when they're not needed anymore, instead of finishing their story. The game still has some good moments in it, but it's all just wasted by everything else that happens in it. This was the most interesting game to me because it was such a huge downgrade from the first one, and it really amazed me how bad it ended up being. I don't really know if we can give the developers at fault, cause we all know the tragic story behind Telltale and how they mistreated their developers by rushing so many games out. A lot of things were probably planned for this game, but they didn't have the proper time to implement it. And now that Telltale is back and working on games again, I hope they now get the proper time to develop their games.